The Diviners is set in 1920s New York. It's a supernatural story. I jokingly call it X-Files with flappers, and my editor refers to it as Stephen King meets The Great Gatsby.
So when The Diviners first landed on my desk, we start to look at it with a producer's hat, but in this case, I was so entrenched in what Libba had written. It's so finely textured and such an unbelievable story. You end up terrified by the end of it, and as a producer, I became terrified of just trying to cast it because there's so many voices and so many characters and so many different kinds of people you have to think about. So the first person I thought of calling after I started reading it was David Rapkin, who had produced the Harry Potter audios for Random House some years ago. And he's dealt with this before.
So I was struck by this book's variety of voices. One thing that was very impressive was the necessity to have someone who did not sound modern. We know by listening to people who are on film from World War II, for instance, that even though the words may be the same, the way these people speak places them in time in such a way as to immediately be recognizable to us. And so my job as the director was to find an actor who would be comfortable in not just a variety of characters, but also in some characters who were not human.
The audition process for The Diviners was very unique in that when I arrived for the audition, there were about, I think, 15 or 20 pages, and the pages were divided by character. They were different characters' chapters. So I met Memphis, Theta, Evie, Blind Bill, a bunch of them I met in the initial audition. I desperately wanted to book the job, not only to get the job, but to be able to read the book early, because one of my greatest joys of being a narrator is that I get to read books before anyone else does.
So David Rapkin and I set up auditions at the Random House studio, which kind of started about 8 a.m. and didn't roll off until about 7 or 7:30. And about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, David comes running down to my office, and David is always excited about something, but you could tell he felt like he really found something, and just walked in and said, "We have her. We have Evie. It's January." And I said, okay, well, let's think about this. Let me come down and kind of take a listen. And I walked down the hall, and David played back the track to me. And I was like, wow, that's Evie. It's January.
The thing that impressed me most about January was as soon as she began reading, I was no longer listening to someone reading. I was completely immersed in the story.
When I got to January's performance, her reading of the book, it was like I could feel that little tingle that goes all the way up to your neck. And I was blown away. I was blown away by her ability to do so many different voices. She's either one of the most talented actresses I've ever met, or she's psychotic, or possibly both, which is a bonus. But she could do all of these characters, and she could differentiate them and give them such life. It was like they just came up off the page. And at the same time, her narration parts, the descriptive parts, were just lovely and evocative, and she has this beautiful voice, and it was like driving out on open road and just, throwing it open. I just think she's phenomenal, and I think that I am just the luckiest person ever. And it was just such a nice process, and I was so happy to be included and to get to be part of that.
So before we actually started the casting process, obviously I finished reading the book and sat down with the editorial director of Listening Library, Rebecca Waugh, just to talk about how we wanted to talk to Libba about casting. And we decided to have a meeting with Rebecca Waugh, myself, Libba Bray, and one of her agents, Tricia. So we sat down in one of the Random House conference rooms for about an hour and a half. And at first, as a producer, you don't always know what the author's expectation of what your casting process will be. So I try to prepare all possible scenarios, a list of possible celebrities that we might want to pursue, a list of working actors that I think really could do a good job. Or another option, which we do use on occasion, which is to just bring in as many actors as we possibly can and audition them. In this case, we decided that we were going to audition 18 actors over a full day, and each actor would come in and read 4 different sections of the book, so that we had a chance to hear what their Evie sounds like or what their Bill sounds like, just so we had a sense of how they would approach each character. And then we can kind of go back and report to Libba, hey, these are the voices we really think work for this.
The process of casting for the audiobook for Diviners was really, really interesting to me. And I had never gotten to work so closely. I mean, other than with Beauty Queens, where I actually recorded it, which was a completely different animal. But Dan and Rebecca at Listening Library said, okay, we're going to send you some auditions. First, we sat down and we talked about what we were looking for. And initially, they talked about maybe having some celebrity reader. And I'm an old theater person. I grew up in theater. I wanted to be a playwright originally. And so it was fun because both Dan and I were kind of in agreement that we really wanted somebody who was a seasoned theatrical performer. And of course, with Broadway right down the street, that offered up so many possibilities. And so then Dan and David, the director, worked together to audition all of these wonderful actresses. And they sent me audio to listen to. And it was just an embarrassment of riches. I mean, everyone was so good.
It's an enormous privilege for a director to work in a situation where you have a work of art, this book, and a performer who is capable through both skill and intuition to resonate with the book in such a way as to become invisible. The idea is that you don't call, in a work of art, attention to the work itself, but the work should place the listener in a position of where you go when you're told a story. And you forget who's telling it to you, and you forget where you're sitting, and you are transported. And I knew as I began to read this book that if I could find the right reader, this would be pretty good.
The choices that I made in that audition remained intact for those characters. So it's, as far as creating those characters, it very much came from my instinct. I find it most effective to meet the character and see what comes out of my mouth, because then later, when I have to sustain that over a matter of days of recording the book, it comes from a place of instinct and not a place of, what did that person sound like? I just meet them and I know what they sound like.
You know that you have an amazing audiobook when it starts with obviously having a great book, and Libba's already done that for us. But the best part of Libba not only giving us a great book, she also wants to be involved in the process. So having Libba involved from the very beginning and spending an hour and a half and emails going back and forth discussing how we want to approach the book is really important. It's a collaboration, and everybody is invested fully. The next part of it is just putting together that perfect team. And I think, again, in this case, putting together someone like David Rapkin, who has such a unique skill set, having worked on the Harry Potter audiobooks, and then bringing him in to do auditions for a full day and coaching actors for a full day on how we want to approach certain characters and giving them the history behind it, because there is a lot of history involved in this recording. And then, of course, finding someone like January LaVoy who can bring it all to life. It's the perfect combination. As an audiobook producer, it's the chemistry you want to bring the written word to the spoken word.
With hearing January read it and hearing David's direction behind it, it gave it this wonderful life that really those voices could be in my head and add to the experiences I was going forward in writing book 2. It's such a theatrical piece in a way, and so it really takes me back to those theater days, and it feels like this wonderful collaboration is going on, and I love it anytime there's a collaborative feel to anything.